Right, children. Now we are going to start a new chapter of this lesson. The effects of heat to the environment. So how does heat affects on the environment, children? Now, in the beginning of the lesson, we discussed about this a little, right? You all know during the daytime, because of the sun's heat, the whole environment gets heated up. But different places of the environment gets heated up at different levels. Okay, we did a small activity to study this as well, right? So in this chapter, we are going to learn what are the importances of heat towards the environment and how can heat affect adversely towards the environment. Okay, right. You may have seen the effect of sunlight during a drought. What is a drought, children? Drought is a season where there is very minimum amounts of rainfalls or no rainfalls at all, right? So you may have seen the effect of sunlight during a drought. So what are the changes that take place in the environment, children? The water bodies get dried up, right? So if the drought prevails for a very long period of time, when there's no rain, all the water bodies get dried up, sometimes even completely. Then what happens? Plants doesn't have enough water to absorb. Not only in the water bodies, the soil water also gets dried up. Right, children? So the animals die, the aquatic animals die because they don't have a living place when all the water bodies get dried up. What happens to the other animals? They will die because of lack of water to drink. Right? Plants die, that is because they don't have enough water to absorb and to grow. Right, children? We'll go through this. Think of the changes that occurred in your environment. Tanks dried out, which means the water bodies, all the reservoirs, right? Ponds, lakes, and other reservoirs and tanks, they all dry out. We'll underline them. So these are the changes that take place. Tanks dry out. The water levels of wells goes down, right? The water level of wells goes down, right? When we consider all the water bodies, some of them dry out, some of their water levels go down, like rivers. Okay? The land gets dry severely. If the drought season prevails for a very long time, in some areas, in some regions, the drought season prevails even for years. In this case, what happens? The land gets dry severely. What is the reason, children? You all know that for the soil to become fertile, right? For the soil to become rich in nutrients, it should have a certain amount of water present in it. Right, children? So during the drought season, what happens? The water present between the sand particles evaporate. Therefore, the composition of the soil changes. Right, the nature of the soil changes. The land gets dry severely. Sometimes you must have seen pictures. The soil cracks during the drought seasons, right? The land gets dry severely. Right. I'm going to show you a small video clip on this topic now. Right, children. There you observed how the land gets dried out because of the drought seasons, right? Because of lack of water, the soil cracks and the entire environment dries out, okay? So the land gets dry severely. The whole environment gets covered with dust. What is the reason? Again, because of the soil particles are very loose, because they are not bound with water particles. What happens? The loose soil can have more dust particles, okay? The whole environment gets covered with dust, right? Forest fires also may occur. Now, do you remember I explained you all about the forest fire earlier? Now, sometimes during drought seasons in forests, sometimes strong wind currents present. So what happens during those strong wind currents present? Sometimes the branches of the trees rub with each other, right? And sometimes two trees rub with each other. Then what happens? Due to rubbing, due to the friction occurred, heat is produced. So when the entire environment is very dry, even with the less amount of heat that produced during the rubbing of these two trees, what happens? these tree parts, these plant parts will easily catch fire. Right, children? Forest fires also may occur due to severe heat. These forest fires spread very easily as the trees are dry. Okay, so what are the changes occur in the environment? Tanks dry out, the water levels of wells go down, the land gets dry severely, the whole environment gets covered with dust. Forest fires also may occur. What are the other changes? Plants die, animals die. Okay, those are the changes take place during drought seasons. Okay, we have a small assignment to do. Take some clay and spread it on the lid of a tin. Leave it at a place where plenty of sunlight falls. Observe the changes. Right? So when it comes to soil, in the other lessons you all are going to learn that soil has 3 different types of particles. Right? Now when you consider clay, now there's a type of soil called clay soil. So when you consider clay, these clay particles have this special ability to retain water in it. Right? That is why clay is sticky. Right? Because of the presence of water mixed with these clay soil particles, that clay soil or clay is very sticky. Right? What we have to do, take some clay and spread it on a lid of a tin. You can take a biscuit tin lid and you have to spread this clay on the biscuit tin lid like this. Right? So it will be like a paste. You can mold it very easily because it is moist. Okay? Leave it at a place where plenty of sunlight falls. What happens? You have to leave it outside. Right? So if you leave it for several days, you can observe the changes very clearly. Okay? Observe the changes. So what will happen? When you leave it, I told you these clay particles can retain a lot of water particles between them. So what will happen? Because of the sun's heat, this clay will get heated up. Therefore, the water particles present between these clay particles will evaporate because of the heat. Right? Then you will observe, after a few days, you will observe this clay cracks up. Earlier it was like this. Now you will see cracks appear like this. That is because of evaporation of water. So because of evaporation of water, the clay gets dried up and therefore the cracks appear on the surface. Okay, children, the same thing happens to the land during long drought seasons. Understand, children? We'll move on to the next. Look at these 2 pictures. Now here we earlier discussed that because of drought seasons, the soil cracks. This is known as soil cracking, right? Because of extreme loss of water present in the soil, this happens. And occurrence of forest fire. Okay? So we have another assignment to do. List out the environmental changes that takes place during a drought. We already discussed some of them here. Tanks dry out, the water levels of the wells go down, right? The land gets dry severely, the whole environment gets covered with dust. Forest fires also may occur. We'll write them. Right. Other things happen. Water levels of tanks, rivers, ponds, etc. reduces. Right? Reduces. So they completely, if the drought season is too long, they completely dry out. Okay? Number 2. Soil quality reduces. And soil cracking. Right. Animals die. due to lack of drinking water. Drinking water and habitats. Plants get dried up or they die. Right. The amount of dust. Increases. Occurrence of forest fire. Okay, so these are some changes that take place. Okay, water levels of tanks, rivers, ponds reduces, so they completely dry up, and soil quality reduces and soil cracking. Animals die due to lack of drinking water and habitats, right? Aquatic animals die because they don't have any place to live, right? Plants get dried up or die, and the amounts of dust increases, and occurrence of forest fire. Okay, children? So these are the harmful effects of that changes take place in the environment during drought seasons, right? So you all know that drought season occurs because the temperature of the environment increases unnecessarily, right? So what if we didn't have this heat? What if we didn't have sunlight? At the same time, you all know that to continue life, we have to have the sun's heat, right? So the heat of the environment must be there to a certain extent to maintain life. And at the same time, if it increases unnecessarily, these type of harmful things will happen. Okay, children, we'll move on to the next. Look at this. You know that water is recycled on the earth. This process is called the water cycle. What is water cycle, children? I'll explain how water cycles in the earth. Right? So, water goes in the earth as a cycle from one place to another place, and this is known as water cycle. Let's see how this happens. Right. Let's say there's a reservoir like this, a water body like this. Right? When you consider the earth, there are water bodies and there are plants as well. You all know in the atmosphere, water vapor present, because atmosphere or air means a collection of different types of gases, right? Water vapor is a type of gas that present in the atmosphere. Where does the atmosphere get this water vapor from, children? Let's see that if there's a water body during the daytime, basically this happens during the daytime because of the sun's heat, the water body gets heated up. Right, children? Then what happens to water? When the water's temperature increases, what happens? Water evaporates, which means liquid water gets heated up, and when the maximum temperature enters, what happens? Water turns into water vapor. Right? This process is known as evaporation. Because of sun's heat, water bodies get heated up and the water evaporates. Right? And water turns into water vapor. Evaporation. Evaporation. Okay, and water vapor is formed. Water vapor is formed. In the same way, you all know that from plant roots, plants absorb water and water present in the other parts of the plant as well. During the daytime, plant body also gets heated up. Right? Because of the temperature increases in the plant body, the water present inside the plant also gets heated up, and this liquid water also turns into water vapor, and it comes out of the plant as water vapor. Right? So from plant body also water vapor gives out, and remember this process of losing the water from the plant body as water vapor is known as transpiration. 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 Okay. Water vapor released from the water body is known as evaporation. Here, loss of water from the plant body as water vapor is known as transpiration. Okay, children. Now, water vapors collected in the atmosphere. Now, what happens in the upper part of the atmosphere? Temperature is lower than that of the lower part near the earth, right? Therefore, what happens? Because of less temperature, less heat, this water vapor cools down. What will happen? Now, you all know that when the liquid water gets heated up, it changes to its gaseous state. In the same way, water vapor means the gaseous water. In the same way, when the water vapor cools down, what happens? It forms again water, right? It turns into water droplets. These water droplets are collected inside clouds, right? So, water vapor changes into tiny droplets inside the clouds, and this process of changing water vapor into clouds is known as condensation. Condensation. Okay, children? So, more and more water droplets are collected inside the cloud, and when the maximum amount of water droplets are collected inside the cloud, when it cannot carry more and more water droplets, what will happen? It comes down as rain. So, water in the clouds come to the ground again as rain, and this is known as precipitation. Right? Precipitation. Then what will happen? This rainwater gets collected and again flows to water bodies, and some of this water goes underground. Underground water is again absorbed by plants, right? This other flowing water goes to the water bodies like this. That collected water, this is known as collection, right? The precipitation, the rainwater flows through the ground and collected in the water bodies. And also some of them go and collected as underground, and this process is known as collection. This collected water again during the daytime, because of the sun's heat, gets evaporated, and due to transpiration, water vapors going back to the atmosphere. When the water vapor cools down, clouds are formed. Inside the clouds, droplets of water present. This is known as condensation. When a maximum amount of water droplets collected inside the cloud, it comes down as rain, and which is known as precipitation. And this happens as a cycle. This is known as water cycle. So now, why is this water cycle possible? Because of heat, right? Heat given by the sun, right? You all know, because the water bodies get heated up, the liquid water converts to gaseous water, right? Because the plant body gets heated up, the transpiration takes place and water vapor is added to the atmosphere. Because water vapor is added to the atmosphere, clouds are formed by condensation, right? Because clouds are formed, precipitation takes place and we get rain. What will happen if sun's heat was not there? Evaporation will not take place, transpiration will not take place, therefore water vapor will not be there in the atmosphere. If water vapor is not there, what will happen? Clouds will not form. Understand, children? Therefore, heat is very important. So at the same time, during the drought seasons, because of excessive heat present in the environment, what happens? Sometimes the water level reduces, so sometimes the water bodies completely gets dried out, right? Dried up. And then what happens? The plants, some of the plants die and some of the plants get dried up. Because of that, what happens again? Evaporation reduces, transpiration reduces, therefore water vapor collected in the atmosphere also reduces. If there's no enough water vapor, cloud formation will be reduced. If the amount of clouds present in the atmosphere is less, what will happen? We will not get enough water. So you all know that to maintain this water cycle, heat is an essential factor. At the same time, extreme heat can affect the cycle in a bad way as well, in a harmful way as well. Okay, children? Right. We'll move back to our work. Right? You know that water is recycled on the earth. This process is called the water cycle. The heat of the sun affects the water cycle. Water on the earth evaporates due to the sun's heat. The evaporated water in the atmosphere gets cooled and falls back on the earth as rain. So this is what I explained here in the water cycle. Right? So there's another one. It is identified that there are currents in oceans that are almost similar to large rivers. They are also occurred due to heat. Right? We'll go through this. Water in oceans near the equator is warmer than the water in oceans on the northern and the southern poles. Warm water flows towards the poles as well as cold water flows towards the equator. Right? So water currents occur because of heat, because of temperature changes. Okay? So how does this happen? Let's consider if this is the earth. Right? You all know this is the equator. Okay? These are the polar regions. Okay? So you all know that the equator gets sunlight directly. The sunlight falls on the equator directly, and the polar regions, north and south poles, don't get sunlight much. Right? So when you consider oceans present near the equator, the ocean water gets heated up faster than that of these polar regions. Okay, children? So then what happens? The temperature of the water bodies present near the equator is much higher than that of the temperature of the ocean water in the polar regions. Right? Here temperature is low. Here temperature is high. Here also temperature is low. Right? So because of this temperature difference, what happens, children? The water with this less temperature or low temperature flows towards the areas with high temperature. Right? Here also that happens. In the same way, in this equator area, what happens? The temperature of water is very high. That water also flows towards the polar regions. These are known as water currents. Right, children? Water in oceans near the equator is warmer than the water in oceans on the northern and the southern poles. Right? That's why it's given warm water flows towards the poles as well as cold water flows towards the equator. Okay? Warm water flows towards the poles as well as cold water flows towards the equator. Right? So water currents occur as a result of heat given by the sun. Okay, children? Right. We'll move on to the next. Scientists have revealed that the temperature of the earth is rising gradually. This incident is known as global warming. You must have heard this term. Right? Global warming. Global warming. Right? Now earlier I explained y'all there should be a certain temperature. Now sun's heat is very important to maintain the proper or adequate temperature to maintain life in earth. At the same time, too much of in temperature is not good. Right? When the heat of the earth increases drastically, what happens? It's really bad for the plants and animals. Right? So this is known as global warming. Okay? They have found that many reasons for this. The main reasons are too much combustion of fossil fuels. Right? Too much combustion of fossil fuels and deforestation. Emission of carbon dioxide gas. Right? Emission of carbon dioxide increases the temperature of the environment. When a lot of carbon dioxide gas present in the environment, in the atmosphere, more heat is retained in the atmosphere. Right, children? Carbon dioxide has to be there. We need carbon dioxide for photosynthesis, but at the same time, there should be a certain amount. When it increases too much, what will happen, children? It can trap more and more heat waves coming from the sun. This is not good. This increases the temperature of the environment, right? Unnecessarily. And therefore, this is known as global warming. So, we have to reduce the amount of carbon dioxide gas that is released to the environment. What are the methods of that carbon dioxide get released to the environment? Basically, here combustion of fossil fuels, right? Fossil fuels like coal, petrol, diesel we use in our day-to-day lives. Due to combustion of these fossil fuels, what happens? A lot of carbon dioxide gas is released to the environment. Right, children? That is one reason. Deforestation, cutting down trees. Why do we need trees? You all know that trees do photosynthesis. So during photosynthesis, carbon dioxide gas is absorbed by the trees and oxygen gas is released. Oxygen gas is released. This is carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide gas is absorbed by the trees. Thereby, unnecessary levels of carbon dioxide gas is reduced in the atmosphere. But what will happen? What is deforestation? Deforestation means cutting down trees, clearing the forest. Then what happens? When the number of plants reduce, there are no plants, no adequate plants to absorb the excessive amounts of carbon dioxide in the environment. Right, children? Therefore, what happens? The carbon dioxide in the atmosphere increases and thereby it can trap more and more heat coming from the sun and the global warming also increases. Okay, so emission of carbon dioxide increases the temperature of the environment. Due to such human activities, many serious problems may occur in the future, right? So combustion of fossil fuels, deforestation, they both are human activities, okay? When the temperature rises, the glaciers of the poles start melting, which results in the rise of the sea level. Now, this is another harmful effect that happens due to global warming. So what happens? When the temperature of the earth increases, you all know these are polar regions, North Pole and South Pole, right? You all know because of really low temperatures present in these areas, water present as glaciers, ice, okay? So these glaciers, what happens? Due to global warming, the heat of the earth increases unnecessarily. In that case, what happens, children? These glaciers melt. Melting means ice converts to water, right? Solid converts to water, right? Then what happens? Because of conversion of this ice into water, what happens? The sea levels increases. So this ice, the melted ice, as water flows towards the ocean, and therefore what happens, children? The sea level increases, right? So when the temperature rises, the glaciers of the poles start melting, which results in the rise of the sea level. Rise of the sea level. There's another reason to increase the sea level, children, here. So you know that water gets expanded when it is heated. You all know that during the daytime, because of the sun's heat, the water present in the water bodies in the oceans absorb this heat, and what happens when liquids absorb heat? They expand, the volume increases, right? When the glaciers melt also, the volume of water increases, and because of expansion of water also, the sea levels increase. Okay? So here, when the temperature rises, the glaciers of the poles start melting. The glaciers start melting, right? And water gets expanded when it is heated. Water gets expanded, right? So two reasons. Number one, number two here. Because of the melting of the glaciers and because of the expansion of water, what happens to the volume of water? Because of these two reasons, water levels of the oceans increase, right? it is also one of the reasons for the rise of the sea level, expansion of water, right? So why increase of the sea levels is not good? Look at this. Because of this, many of the small islands face the threat of being drowned in the sea, right? When the water levels keep on expanding, what will happen? The small islands will one day, they will disappear because they will be covered with water. Okay, children, therefore, increase of water levels in the sea also not very good. Right, children? Okay, we'll move on to the next. Right, we have an assignment to do. Find out how global warming occurs. Write an article to a science magazine about global warming. So you can read about global warming, right? You can read magazines, books, and you can even refer to the internet and find more information about global warming, right? So global warming basically occurs because of the temperature of the environment increases unnecessarily. Okay, this happens actually because of the presence of certain types of gases, especially carbon dioxide gas, right? Carbon dioxide gas. What are the other gases? There are other gases as well, children. Methane, right? Nitrous oxide, and sometimes water vapor as well. Okay? Nitrous oxide and water vapor as well. Okay, and some other gases also there. But basically it is carbon dioxide. Okay, so find out how global warming occurs. When a lot of these type of gases present in the atmosphere, what happens? The temperature of the atmosphere increases and this is called global warming. So basically this happens, mainly this happens because of carbon dioxide, too much of carbon dioxide. So what are the methods of carbon dioxide getting added to the environment, children? So we'll write carbon dioxide due to burning of fossil fuel. Burning of fossil fuel. Right? And we learned deforestation, cutting down trees. Deforestation. Okay. Sometimes factories emit carbon dioxide, right? Factory emissions. Okay, children? So you can find more information on global warming and how to prevent these things as well. Okay? Right, children. We have completed the lesson now. We are going to read the summary to see what we have done so far. Summary. Heat is needed for the existence of life and for various phenomena, which means incidents, to take place in the environment. Okay? The main source of heat is the sun. We all know because of the sun's heat, different parts of the environment gets heated up at different levels. Okay? We can obtain heat from combusting fossil fuels, right? Combustion of fossil fuels is a method of generating heat. We can use heat to generate electricity as well. Using heat, we can generate electricity, right? Heat can be obtained from electricity. Okay, because electricity has a heating effect. Okay, children? Heat is the reason for increase and decrease of the temperature of substances. You all know that when heat is absorbed by the objects, its temperature increases. When the heat is released by objects, their temperature reduces. Okay? The reason for expansions and contractions of substances is heat. You all know when objects absorb heat, their volume and size increases, and when objects release heat, what happens? Their size and their volume decreases, and that is known as contraction. Increase of the volume and the size is known as expansion. Decrease in the size and the volume is known as contraction. Right? Change of states of matter occurs due to heat. You all know that when heat is absorbed by objects, solids turn into liquids, liquids turn into gas. And when heat is released from substances, what happens? gases turn into its liquids and liquids turn into solids. Okay? Heat affects the properties of substances as well. We all know that because of heat, what happens? The color change also takes place, right? Heat affects the properties of substances and heat affects the color change of substances as well, right? Heat must be used efficiently and with caution. Okay, heat can be dangerous as well. Right, children, we have completed the lesson now. I hope you all understood what we have done so far. We did a lot of experiments as well. Some of these activities you all can do at home very easily. You all have to try to do them. So then you can understand the lesson clearly. Now we are going to start the exercises in the next chapters. Remember, children, before you watch those chapters, you all have to write the answers all by yourselves. Then you can watch the chapter and you can check whether your answers are correct or not, and thereby you can improve your knowledge.